Okay, this is a video on how to measure with a micrometer. You might remember that we use the word micron for 10 to the negative 6 meters because a micrometer is a device, and you're like, what's the device? Well, there it is. This is a micrometer, and you can see it measures to the nearest 0.01 millimeter. What does that mean? That means on this dial, that's reading 0 because the zero's on the mark. If I squeeze it too hard, ooh, it's too tight. So you want to have it just whatever that tightness is, you feel that. So that's going to be when, in real life, IRL, when you do this. So I'm going to back it off. That's 50 hundredths. So that's half a millimeter. And I'm going to back it off again. And you just measured 1 whole millimeter. So in here, this is 1 millimeter. Let me back off a little bit so you can see it. Do you see that one mark right there? So I'm at 1.30 millimeters. So in here, this is 1 millimeter. Let me back off a little bit so you can see it. Do you see that one mark right there? So I'm at 1.30 millimeters. So let me back it off to 1 millimeter. Are y'all doing this too? Backing it to 1 millimeter? Okay, so I'm going to go 2 dials. That's 1.5. That's 2.0 millimeters. But you're like, I don't see the second millimeter. Back off. There we go. Now we can kind of see that line. So now let me back it off to 1 millimeter. Are y'all doing this too? Backing it to 1 millimeter? Okay, so I'm going to go 2 dials. That's 1.5. That's 2.0 millimeters. But you're like, I don't see the second millimeter. Back off. There we go. Now we can kind of see that line. So now I'm at 2 millimeters. So every 2 turns is 1 millimeter. That's why this is a very accurate device. Okay, so now I'm going to measure the diameter of a penny. So I'm going to really back it off. I'm like, I can't count how many turns that is. So I'm going to go way down here. And do you see the 20 now? See that 20 mark? So if I cover up the 20 mark, that's the 20.5. I just covered up the 20. I'm sorry, that was 19.5. I'm sorry, that's 20.5. Let me back it off. That's 20, but you could see the 19.5 down there. Okay, so I'm gonna back it off to 20. And hopefully when you put the penny in, it's gonna have some room. Yeah, okay, so this penny is gonna be bigger. 20 is too big, so it's gonna be 19 point something. So I'm backing it off to the 20. Okay, pause, okay, so here's 20 millimeters. I'm gonna back it off. That's 19.5 right there. So I'm like, well, it's a little bit more. So I'm gonna back it off. Back it off, and it stops. So that's 19.0. Okay, so that's almost to the 19. If I tighten it too hard, that's too tight. I'm gonna go back to my original tightness. There we go. So it's 19.0 something. On this one, it's reading, let me pause. Okay, that's reading 19.02. That's 19.02 millimeters. Did you guys get something? Okay, so now we're going to measure the size of this pencil at 0.7 millimeters. So that's almost a millimeter. So I'm going to back it off a little bit. So there it's the 0, and I'm going to make it one turn to a half and one turn to a whole. So that is 100 of those 10ths of millimeters, so it's 1 millimeter. So I'm going to put this inside, and it's going to be more than a half because it's 0.7. So 0.5 plus 0.2 is 0.7, so I'm going to rotate. It's going to be on the 0.2, see that? So that's a half. Another pointer. This is the half of millimeter, and you're covering up the hole. Let me back it off, and you can see there's 1 whole millimeter. See that line right there? That's the millimeter line. So that's 1 millimeter. Crank it down to 90, 80, and 70 hundredths of a millimeter. That's 0.7 millimeters. I don't have to write it down because it's already written down right there. 0.7 millimeters. That's this kind of mechanical lead. Now let me get the other lead out and see if it's different. And see, this is 0.9, so it's 90 hundredths of a millimeter. So I'm going to go down to 0 again. It's on 0. I'm going to back off. That's a half a turn. That's all right. It's 1 turn is half, 2 turns is a whole. So that's 100 hundredths of a millimeter. So I'm going to go down to, oh, guess what? There's 90 right there. So that is the 0.5 plus 0.40 is 0.9 millimeters. So they did not cheat us. We are getting our worth of lead, which is really graphite, not PB, but some kind of carbon compound, so we can see it on paper. Okay, thank you.